People think writing a will is about preparing for death. But sometimes it's about revealing the truth while you're still alive. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 72 years old. And a few months ago, I made a decision that changed everything about my family. But to understand why I did it, you need to understand what came before. I wasn't always the kind of man people overlook. There was a time when my house was full. Noise, laughter, arguments over dinner. The kind of life that feels ordinary while you're living it, but becomes priceless once it's gone. I worked construction most of my life. Early mornings, long days, hands that carried more weight than they probably should have. But I never complained, because I had a reason. My wife, Margaret, she was the center of everything, stronger than me, in ways that mattered, kinder than I ever managed to be. And when she got sick, everything else stopped mattering. Cancer doesn't just take a person. It takes time, energy, hope. I stood by her through every appointment, every treatment, every long night where sleep didn't come. And when she finally passed, the house didn't just become quiet. It became empty, not physically, but in a way that stays with you. After that, I told myself one thing. At least I still had my children. Robert, Patricia, Claire. 3 lives I had helped build. 3 people who once filled this house with everything that made it feel alive. And for a while, I believed that was enough. I started sending each of them money every month. $3,000. No conditions. No expectations. Just support. Because that's what a father does, even when his role is supposed to be finished. At first, they called, checked in, asked how I was doing. But slowly, those calls became shorter, less frequent, until one day they stopped completely. No arguments, no explanation, just silence. And that silence told me more than words ever could. Because when people don't need you anymore, you find out exactly where you stand. Still, I said nothing, did nothing, because I wasn't ready to accept what it meant. Not yet. But that changed. One Thanksgiving evening, when I drove 40 minutes in the rain, thinking I still had a place at their table. I remember that evening clearly. Thanksgiving. Rain hitting the windshield the entire drive. 40 minutes on the road. And not once did it cross my mind that I might not be welcome. Because that's the thing about hope. It makes you believe in things that aren't there anymore. I pulled up outside Robert's house just after sunset. Lights were on. Cars in the driveway. For a moment, I smiled. Because it looked exactly how it used to. Warm, alive, like a place I still belonged. I grabbed the small pie I had brought. Margaret used to make it every year. I tried to keep that tradition alive, even if no one else did. I walked up to the door, knocked, waited. I could hear voices inside, laughter, plates moving, life happening, but it sounded distant, like I was already outside of it. After a few seconds, Robert opened the door. He looked surprised, not happy, not relieved, just surprised. "Dad?" he said, like I had shown up unannounced. "I thought I'd come by," I said, holding up the pie slightly. There was a pause, a small one, but I felt it. "We already ate," he said. "No invitation. No, come in, just that." I nodded slowly. "Oh, I see." I stood there for a second, waiting, not for food, for something else. A gesture, a sign, anything. But it didn't come. I glanced past him, saw the table, half cleared, people still sitting, talking, no one looking toward the door. Like I wasn't expected. Like I wasn't missed. You should have called, he added. I almost smiled. Because once upon a time, I didn't need to. This used to be my home too, I said quietly. He didn't respond, just shifted slightly in the doorway, blocking the entrance without realizing it. Or maybe he did. I handed him the pie. Give this to the kids, I said. He took it. Thanks. And that was it. No hug. No, stay for a while. No, we're glad you came. Just a door slowly closing. And me standing outside in the rain. I walked back to my car, sat there for a few minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, not starting the engine, because something had just settled inside me. Not anger, not sadness, something clearer, because in that moment, I finally understood my place in their lives. I wasn't part of it anymore. I was an afterthought. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. That drive home felt longer than 40 minutes. Not because of the road, but because of what I had to accept. And that night, for the first time, I stopped sending the money. The first month, I didn't send the money. No one noticed. At least not right away. There were no calls, no messages, nothing. And that told me something important. They weren't checking on me. They were waiting on something else. By the second month, the calls started. Robert was the first. Hey, Dad, he said casually. Everything all right? His tone wasn't concerned. It was calculated. I'm fine, I replied. There was a pause. Then he got to the point. I think there's been a mistake. The transfer didn't come through. Of course. Not, how are you? Not, do you need anything? Just the money. I didn't send it, I said calmly. Silence. Then, what do you mean you didn't send it? I mean exactly that. His tone changed immediately. Sharp, defensive. Dad, we rely on that. Rely. That word stayed with me. Because I never raised them to depend on me like that. I've helped enough, I said. It's time you stand on your own. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, that's not fair. Fair. I almost laughed. Because life isn't measured by what feels fair. It's measured by what's real. I've been fair my entire life, I said quietly. And this is me continuing to be. He didn't understand that. Didn't want to? Fine, he said finally. Do what you want. And just like that, the call ended. No goodbye. No concern. Just frustration. Patricia called next. Different tone. Softer. But the same purpose. Dad, I heard you didn't send anything this month. I waited. I just wanted to check. Is everything okay financially? There it was. Not concern for me. Concern about whether the source was still working. I'm fine, I said. I just won't be sending money anymore. Silence. Then, are you serious? Yes. Her voice dropped. That's going to make things difficult for us. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understand, but I didn't change my answer. Claire didn't call. She just sent a message. Are you cutting us off now? No emotion. No effort. Just accusation. I looked at the screen for a long time, then put the phone down. Because by that point, I didn't need any more confirmation. The pattern was clear. The connection was clear. And the absence of anything real was clearer than all of it. For years, I thought I was supporting my children. But in truth, I was sustaining their distance. And the moment I stopped, so did whatever was left between us. That's when I made the decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. If my presence meant nothing, then neither would my absence. And that's when I picked up the phone and called the one person I trusted to handle things properly. Frank Dalton, my attorney, because what I was about to do next wasn't emotional. It was final. Frank Dalton had been my attorney for over 20 years, long enough to understand me without explanations. When I called him that morning, he knew something was different. "Gerald," he said, "it's been a while. I need to update my will." A short pause. "Come in this afternoon." By 3, I was sitting across from him. Same office, same desk, different purpose. He opened a folder. "Is this a minor change?" he asked. "Or something bigger?" I looked at him. Everything. That was enough. We started going through it. Assets, property, savings, years of work reduced to numbers on paper. "Your current will divides everything equally between your 3 children," he said. "I know," I replied. "And you want to change that?" "Yes." No hesitation. "Completely?" "Completely." He nodded slowly. "Do you want to explain why?" I leaned back slightly. "Because they've already shown me where I stand," I said. "And I'm adjusting accordingly." He didn't question it. "All right," he said. "How do you want to restructure it?" I looked down at the papers, then said, "I want to remove all 3 of them." Saying it out loud didn't feel heavy. It felt right. Frank studied my face for a moment. "You're certain?" "Yes." No anger, just clarity. "And the estate?" he asked. That's when I told him. A literacy foundation in Margaret's name, a local shelter, and a trust fund for my grandson, Danny, the only one who still checked on me. "Held until he turns 25, I added. Frank nodded. We finalized everything, carefully, until nothing was left unclear. At the end, he placed the documents in front of me. "All that's left is your signature." I picked up the pen, paused for a moment, then signed. Just like that, everything changed. Frank closed the folder. "It's done," I nodded. "But before leaving," I said, "I want them all here." He looked up. "Your children?" "Yes." "For what?" I paused, then said, "To hear it, because some decisions need to be delivered face to face." The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon. Frank handled the calls. Short, direct, formal. "Your father would like you at my office. It concerns his estate." That was enough to get their attention. All 3 of them agreed. No hesitation, which told me something. They were expecting good news. Thursday came quietly. I arrived early, sat in that same chair across from Frank's desk, hands resting calmly. No nerves, no second thoughts. Because once a decision is made with clarity, there's nothing left to question. One by one, they arrived. Robert came first, well-dressed, confident, like he already knew what this was about. "Dad," he said, giving a quick nod. Not warm, just polite. Patricia followed, a slight smile, carefully measured. "Hi, Dad." Then Claire, phone in hand, barely looking up as she walked in. "Hey." They all sat down, across from me, waiting, expecting. I studied them for a moment, not with anger, not with disappointment, just observation. Because sometimes you need to see people clearly one last time. Frank cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "This meeting concerns Mr. Whitmore's updated will." That word, updated, caught their attention. I saw it immediately. The shift, subtle, but there. Robert leaned back slightly, relaxed. Patricia glanced at him. A quick look, shared understanding. Claire finally put her phone down. Now they were listening, because now it mattered. Frank opened the folder, calm, professional. The previous will, he continued, divided the estate equally among the three of you. Robert gave a small nod. Like that was exactly what he expected. But then Frank added, "This arrangement has been changed." Silence. Instant. Complete. All three of them straightened slightly. The room felt different now. Less certain. More alert. Changed how? Robert asked. Frank didn't answer immediately. He simply adjusted the papers in front of him, then looked up. "Mr. Whitmore has made a complete revision to his estate." No one spoke, but I could see it. The tension, the curiosity, the assumption that whatever came next would still benefit them, because that's what they believed, that no matter what, they were entitled to something. Frank turned the page and began to read, and with every word, that belief started to disappear. Frank's voice stayed calm as he read, clear, steady, professional. The estate valued at approximately $1.1 million. That got their attention immediately. All three of them leaned forward slightly, listening more carefully now. "Will be distributed as follows." A pause. Then, "A significant portion will be donated to a literacy foundation, established in the name of Margaret Whitmore." Patricia frowned. Robert shifted in his seat. Claire looked up properly for the first time. Frank continued, "Additional funds will be allocated to a local shelter." Now the tension was visible. Real. Confusion replacing confidence. "And a trust fund will be established for Daniel Whitmore." At that, something changed. They hadn't expected that. To be released when he reaches the age of 25. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Robert leaned forward. "Wait," he said. "What about us?" Frank didn't react. He simply turned the page, then said, "Each of the three children, Robert, Patricia, and Claire, will receive $1. No one moved. No one spoke. For a moment, it felt like the room had frozen. Then, Robert stood up suddenly. "You wouldn't dare," he said, his voice sharp, disbelief mixed with anger. I looked at him calmly, held his gaze, and said, "I already did, Robert." That was the moment everything broke. "This is ridiculous," Patricia said. "There has to be a mistake." Claire shook her head. "You can't be serious." Frank remained silent, because there was nothing to clarify. It was all written, all signed, all final. Robert turned back to me. "This isn't fair," he said. There it was again. Fair. I almost smiled, because they still didn't understand. "Fair," I said quietly. "You stopped calling." No one spoke. "You stopped visiting." Silence. "You stopped showing up." Now they were looking at me differently. Not confident anymore. Not certain. Just exposed. "And now," I continued, "you're surprised I noticed?" Patricia's voice softened. "Dad, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said. No anger. Just truth. Claire crossed her arms. "So you're just cutting us off?" I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "You did that yourselves." Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was realization. Because now, they were finally hearing what I had understood months ago. That relationships aren't built on what you give. They're built on what you show. And they had shown me everything I needed to see. But what came next hit them even harder. Robert didn't sit back down. He stayed standing, like that alone could change what he had just heard. "This is insane," he said. "You're giving everything away?" I looked at him calmly. "I'm giving it where it matters. That's not your decision to make alone," he snapped. I almost laughed, but I didn't. "Actually," I said, "it is." That stopped him, just for a second. Then Patricia spoke. "Dad, We're your children. Her voice softer now. Careful, like she was trying a different approach. I nodded. Yes, and that should mean something. It does, I replied. Just not what you think. Silence. Claire leaned forward. So what? This is punishment? She asked. I shook my head. No. Then what is it? I paused, then said, it's consequence. That word settled in the room. Heavy, clear, because consequences don't come from anger. They come from patterns. And theirs had been clear for a long time. Robert ran a hand through his hair. You're overreacting, he said. People get busy. That's life. I held his gaze. Busy for months? I asked. No answer. Too busy to call? Silence. Too busy to show up? Now he looked away. Because excuses don't hold up when they're said out loud. Patricia tried again. We were going through things. I nodded slowly. I know. Because everyone is? That's not the difference. The difference is who you still make time for. Claire exhaled sharply. So that's it? We get $1? Yes. Frank confirmed it quietly. That is correct. Robert shook his head. You're going to regret this. Maybe he believed that. Maybe he needed to. But I didn't respond. Because regret comes from doubt. And I had none. Patricia's eyes filled slightly. What about everything you taught us? She asked. That question stayed with me. Because it mattered. I leaned forward slightly. That's exactly why I did this, I said. They looked at me, confused. Because I didn't raise you to take, I continued. I raised you to value people. Silence again. But different now. Not defensive. Not angry. Just uncomfortable truth. And when that didn't happen, I added, I adjusted what I leave behind. No one argued. Because there was nothing left to argue with. The decision was made. The will was signed. And for the first time, they were facing something they couldn't change. But the hardest part for them was still coming. No one spoke for a few moments after that. The room felt heavier now. Not with anger, with reality. Robert finally sat down. Slowly. Like the weight of it had caught up to him. This can't be final, he said. But his voice had changed. Less confident. More uncertain. Frank answered calmly. It is signed, witnessed, and legally binding. That was it. No room left. Patricia wiped her eyes quietly. We didn't know it was this serious, she said. I looked at her. You didn't ask, I replied. Because that was the truth. Not once did they stop to understand. Claire leaned back in her chair. Silent now. Thinking. Maybe for the first time. Robert shook his head again. So what now? He asked. Not angry anymore. Just lost. I took a breath. Because this part mattered. Now, I said, you live your lives. They looked at me. Confused. As you've been doing, I continued. Without me, that hit harder than the will. Because money is one thing. Absence is another. Patricia spoke softly. That's not what we want. I nodded. I know, but it's what you chose. Silence. Robert looked down at his hands. Then said something quieter. We thought you'd always be there. I almost smiled. Not out of humor, but understanding. And I was, I said, until it didn't matter anymore. That sentence stayed in the air, because it was simple and true. Claire finally spoke again. What about Danny? She asked. I looked at her. He showed up, I said. That was enough. No explanation needed, because effort speaks for itself. Frank closed the folder gently, signaling the end. But before anyone stood, I said one last thing. This isn't about money. They all looked at me. It's about value, I continued. And now you know the difference. No one argued. No one protested. Because they couldn't. The truth doesn't leave space for that. One by one, they stood up. Quieter than when they came in. Different. Not completely changed, but shaken. And as they walked out of that office, I realized something. They hadn't lost the money. They had lost something far more important. And for the first time, they knew it. The room was quiet after they left. Frank closed the folder and looked at me. You handled that calmly, he said. I nodded. Because I made this decision a long time ago. He studied me for a moment. No second thoughts? I shook my head. None, and I meant it. Because doubt only exists when you're unsure. I wasn't. After everything was done, I stepped outside. The air felt different. Lighter. Not because I had taken something away, but because I had stopped carrying something that no longer belonged to me. For years, I thought being a father meant giving without limits. Showing up no matter what. Holding things together even when others stopped trying. But there's a point where giving stops being love and starts becoming permission. Permission for people to take, to forget, to assume you'll always be there, no matter how little they give in return. And I realized I had allowed that, not because I was weak, but because I believed things would change. They didn't, so I did. That evening, I went home, sat in the same chair I had sat in for years. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt honest. A few days later, Danny came by. No call, no reason, just showed up. Hey, Grandpa, he said, walking in like he always had. I smiled slightly. Hey, we sat together for a while, talked about nothing important. And somehow, that meant everything. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Are you okay? He asked. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, the answer came easy. Yeah, I said. I am. He nodded, satisfied, because he wasn't asking for anything. He was just there. And that's when I understood something clearly. In the end, it's not about how many people you have. It's about who shows up when there's nothing to gain. I didn't lose my children that day. I just saw them for who they had already become. And sometimes, that kind of clarity is worth more than anything you could ever leave behind.